That's a rough one, to say the least, for the West Virginia Mountaineers, as WVU loses a tough one to Texas Tech 23-20. Once again, back-to-back weeks, West Virginia fans watching a game-winning field goal by the opponent. And this time to, well, not the elite of the conference, but a team that many thought West Virginia should be able to beat. They come back in the second half, but it ends up meaning nothing as the Mountaineers lose it 23-20. This is your WVU postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, WV Sports Now. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I'm going to recap this game and also talk about the future of this program this season and beyond, and if this is now time to prepare for next season beyond trying to figure out really the success story of this year. This team now sitting 2-3. This team now has another conference loss. And once again, to a team that some thought West Virginia should have been able to beat. I will be joined by Matty Staudt, who is the president of Jam Street Media, the EVP of podcast Amaze Media Lab, and host of Burning Couch podcast, along with Pat White and Steve Slayton. You know those names, Mountaineer fans, but you also should know his name. Matty, thanks for joining me on the show, man. I'm happy we got to do this finally, and that was a tough one, but I'm happy to talk to you nonetheless.
At halftime, I was almost livid with you. I'm like, finally I'm gonna come on, and it's after this nonsense,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a rough game on a lot of levels, man. Especially that first half. It perplexes you of how the team could seem so unprepared to come into a game they should have won.
And some could go in that direction. Yeah, it certainly could be perplexing, and it's been a roller coaster ride this year. Neil Brown finally picks up that elusive big win over Virginia Tech. Hadn't had a big win in 3 years as head coach, really. And then roller coaster ride continues. And now, of course, the Oklahoma game, people kind of expected the loss, losing by only 3 points. Moral victories don't exist, but that was as close as you can get. And then to turn around and lose this one, there was even a thought process that, based on what I saw from Maryland Friday night, with them getting beat down and barely beating Illinois earlier in the year, that maybe Maryland was a bit overrated, and West Virginia turned it over so many times to lose that game. But if you fix that game and the way the season had gone, maybe West Virginia would have been ranked if you had that win. But it's just an average West Virginia team, to say the least, and that's pretty clear now after this loss to Texas Tech. So what I do want to ask you to start things off here, and there's plenty to unpack, as you alluded to, what's your current feeling on the state of this program? It's been a roller coaster ride. West Virginia now loses this 23-20. Texas Tech, it's no one's prediction as a conference champion, but they are now 4-1, to give them credit. They have had some wins against lesser opponents, but they get this one. It's a big win. Jarret Doege once again can't beat the school that his brother played quarterback against.
Oh, he did? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, Seth Doege played. yeah. If you didn't know, now you know. Seth Doege played quarterback at Texas Tech. Neil Brown was there for a while. They knew each other since Jarret Doege was in 8th grade. Yeah. Shocking, breaking news here on the post-game show. But once again, that becomes his kryptonite. I don't know if that's in his head or what's going on. And the roller coaster ride goes from the season to the game. Mountaineers now 2-3. They lose another one in conference. Where are you right now?
I'm kind of trusting the climb. Is that
Okay.
When it comes to recruiting, I'm so happy. This team is really young.
Yeah.
And so that part, I trust the climb.
Yeah.
When it comes to the coaching,
recruited class coming in is there. They're a top 20 class.
Oh man, this is a great team. This will be the talent's all there.
Right.
Where I don't see the talent is in play calling and time management and just, all these dumb penalties. And that's something that needs to get fixed on the coaching side, as much as the players. But I'm like everybody, we all love Neil. I really do like him. I think he's a good coach.
Such a nice guy. He really is a nice man.
He's not like Holgerson, who was really easy to talk trash about because it wasn't very pleasant when you met him or talked to him ever. But I just feel like maybe there's a need for an offensive coordinator to come in, somebody with, some good pedigree or something. I don't know. I don't think it's all on the players though. That's for sure. But I do think that, Doege is solid. He's a solid QB. He really sometimes, and then he's not. And Garrett Greene, I love him. I wanted him to have a Pat White moment today. I wanted him to come into the game. We're down, take us down, win the game, and be our starting quarterback. He's not ready yet, though. I just don't think he's ready yet.
Okay. Apparently Neil Brown doesn't think so either, because I did think that this game might have been the opportunity to see a little bit more from Garrett Greene. And I don't just mean a few yard dumpers and he gets 5 pass attempts, but they're not really passes, and he's mostly used as a runner, because we have seen him sprinkled in other games, in particular against Oklahoma. Saw him a little bit early in this one, but then not at all. I don't know if that's because Daggy picked it up a little bit with big plays, but they were even talking on the broadcast where, that was one we could have saw Garrett Greene, or we could have saw him there. And so it does scratch your head of how long is Jared Daggy going to still be the quarterback? Is the personal I've seen this now be brought up. Is the personal relationship that we just made fun of, is that part of this? Because let's be real.
It is.
Yeah, let's be real, if Garrett Greene becomes your starter, you're basically ending Jared Daggy's career, likely his football career, and that's it. And you're the guy who did it. So Neil Brown doesn't want to be that guy, but at some point, if Garrett Greene is your starter next year, you have to get him ready. So that does segue. If you're in charge, Matty Staudt, if you're the head coach of this West Virginia football team right now, if you have it your way, is it time after this loss to prepare for 2022, meaning starting Garrett Greene? So not just sprinkling him in more pass plays, but giving him the keys to whatever this car is. And that might mean you lose more, because we're still not sure about how he can be as an accurate passer. It's not just going to be a running situation for them to win, but is it time to make this the Garrett Greene show, to rebuild again and climb toward 2022, rather than try to putter along this climb to 6 wins and a mediocre bowl game this year?
First of all, I am no coach. I was on the Stoner squad in college. I did not play football. I do like watching football. I don't like the fans who think they know more than the coaches, but I don't think it's time to pull the trigger yet, because still a lot of season left. There's some, and I feel like, Daggy, it's Daggy, the competition is making him better sometimes. Like I definitely saw that second half, he was like, I'm going to do this thing. But at the same time, if it's a couple more games like this, you got to put him in, because he's never going to get good if you don't give him some starting time.
That's my issue.
And like a full length of a quarter, not just, like you said, just little, hits in that there, because we still don't really know what he can do. I've heard he doesn't read defense as well. I've heard that's one of the big knocks on him. But I mean, what is Coach Brown going to say? He does love Daggy. The reason we love Coach Brown is the reason that he's so loyal to Daggy.
He really is a player's coach in that way.
Is. Yeah. And, who wants to end it's not like Daggy's just terrible. He's not terrible. He's terrible at times.
And oddly against Texas Tech. And the first half of this game wasn't just his fault, but last year against Texas Tech was his worst outing of his career. There's a Texas Tech thing going on mentally.
Yeah. I mean, backup QB comes to West Virginia every time they win. So that should be their new motto. We're the kings of taking a backup to WVU and winning.
Yeah, I mean, that basically, once again, Texas Tech 23-20 happened again. Neil Brown, we had a video up earlier in the week talking about what he learned from last year's loss to Tech, and it didn't continue here. Now, whether or not they go to Garrett Greene is a whole conversation that's never going to die. I don't think Neil Brown is, from knowing him and covering him. I do imagine Jared Daggy to start again next week. He will try to put lipstick on the pig of what you're saying, that he played better in the second half. The offense played better in the second half. The blocking wasn't there in the first half. It was a whole team collapse. That's the press conference that's currently going on right now, I am sure, and it'll be there on WV Sports Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live after the show here. But eventually, and if it were me, I would probably pull this trigger already. I'll tell you that right now. Just
really?
Because I think the reason why I would, and I know the Big 12 was more open this year than other years, with Oklahoma maybe being a little down, even though they're undefeated still. They seem vulnerable and nobody else is really leading the conference. But say you get to 6 or 7 wins and it's a similar year like last year, which was a step forward, where you got a bowl victory after the cupboard was bare the year before. And my colleagues, I know, I appear on shows and they called it year 0 then. So I guess now we're at a weird year 2. But okay, you get to this. I don't know what that does now if you go into next year and Garrett Greene is not ready, because Daggy's not going to be the starter next year. Garrett Greene will. There's question marks around Garrett Greene. He could be a runner, but he's not Pat White. And if you're not sure about accurate passing, I've seen him throw some bombs in practice, but Are they going to be accurate in a game? Can he read a defense? Can he switch plays if somebody's coming at you? Can he throw it into coverage and in the perfect spot? Can he throw it away from coverage? A lot of question marks. I don't know if that's going to happen, but maybe you got to figure it out in the season. I don't know. It sucks to do that to Dante Stills and some others as well, because you're basically throwing their season in the garbage can if you do that. This isn't really a preseason, but it'll be a question. But sticking on this game here for a moment, did you notice anything that changed at all that gives you hope for next week or moving forward in terms of the first half to the second half? Because, yeah, they lose by a field goal, but they outplayed Texas Tech in the second half. Texas Tech hung on for the field goal because of such a big lead in that first half. West Virginia finally figured out that Texas Tech secondary sucked, and they managed to pick them apart. But are there positive signs moving forward that, okay, now they figured it out, so now they're going to clip off some wins, even though that's a bad loss?
No. I mean, we can't play a full game of football. And that's been the case for a while now. It's not like a new thing this season, but it's dramatic this season. So until I see two halves of a football played well, I feel like it's the same team every week. They just can't, it was just a different flavor today.
Welcome to my last answer, though. I agree, but that's kind of why I'm just figuring giving it to Garrett Greene now. Because if you're going to lose a couple games, I'd rather almost, I think, better for the future of the program, go ahead and lose by 20 with Garrett Greene trying to figure it out rather than lose by 3 every week. At least we can get our, night ready rather than have to sit there waiting for, the inevitable. I don't know. That'll be a conversation moving forward. I do want to ask here, Matty Staudt joining me here on the WVU Postgame show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WV Sports Now. Head over to our site at WV Sports Now for all the postgame coverage, including this game recap. Matty joining me here is the president of Jam Street Media and the EVP of podcast Amaze Media Lab. Matty, I do want to ask you just kind of an overlying question here, because we're talking about this team this year, the team within the game, the roller coaster ride that has been this season and the game, and the future of Jarret Doege or Garrett Greene with this team. This is year 3 for Neal Brown. The cupboard was kind of bare, taking over for Dana Holgorsen. I've talked to former players. You've talked to former players. At the very least, Neal Brown walked in the door, first order of business. He called Pat White. He called Pat McAfee. He called Steve Slayton. He called Mike Logan and said, I apologize. You weren't welcome here for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. Come on back. He kind of welcomed back alums, distinguished alums, players. He made it more of the history of the program rather than when Holgorsen was here. Let's face it, it was the Holgorsen show, and it was him kind of getting mad at referees, and they won some big games early. They disappointed late, and it wasn't exactly as friendly of an atmosphere. Neal Brown is loved by fans, by media. He's a nice guy for sure, and they did win a bowl game last year. It wasn't easy to get there. But now you come off of the big win over Virginia Tech. You then do this roller coaster ride. You have kind of a moral victory over Oklahoma, even though a lesser OU team. And then you lose this game. You go back to the interceptions against Maryland. Yeah, you dominated LIU, but you're in year 3. It seems like they're in neutral. They're not really climbing. To climb, you got to go up. Maybe they're even going backwards. Where are you in terms of trusting the climb? Are you still trusting the climb? Are you nervous about trusting the climb? Are you thinking they're falling? What is your situation in terms of that climb now, in terms of Neal Brown as the right guy here to lead this team back to glory?
I went from an elevator to an escalator to now it's an escalator that I have to walk on. It doesn't work, but I'm still climbing. I still trust it because, and it's because of the recruiting and because of how young this team is. And the fact that, Neal Brown has brought in some really great players, and any kind of change now, we're going to lose any momentum we have a chance at having. So, and considering in 2 years, we're going to be playing in a Big 12 that we have a chance to win every year. And
who knows? Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah.
But I mean, it's definitely a different look. And I still think we're headed in the right direction. But again, it's Doege. Maybe that's the stumbling block with the young guys, and we'll see.
That's kind of, I guess, where everybody has to be right now. Of course, it does not get much easier as West Virginia will now play a ranked team next week. So that you lose to a non-ranked team, you're now going to have a ranked team on the schedule against Baylor, the Baylor Bears, that one on the road. It's not going to get easier for West Virginia, which is why this loss stings more for the program. It's another conference loss, but you could easily be 0-3 in conference play in the middle of the season. I mean,
we win next week though.
Okay. See
we go there and look like another team. And then we'll suck it again the week after. But I got a good feeling.
That would be a West Virginia thing to do. That would be maybe kind of what the Neil Brown era was. That was the end of the Holgorsen era that some people were sick of. At least there is the big win over Virginia Tech, but who knows what they really are. And then, of course, it has been a roller coaster ride overall. And since then, Matty, I definitely appreciate you joining me. We'll definitely have you back on the show. And I know you got the Burning Couch podcast that maybe you're bringing back. Maybe you're going to tease that could have an episode at some point here in the future.
Yeah, Steve and I will.
But
who knows? It'll be either Steve and I or Steve, Pat and I, but we'll definitely put one out. Do want to mention, I produce
Pat's a busy man, as you mentioned. Yeah.
I have a podcast called Appalachian Mysteria that I produce. That we had the first season about the Martin Karen, the WVU co-ed murders. We have a little bonus season out about some crime happened during the 80s in Huntington. So go check it out if you want to hear like an awesomely produced true crime podcast about West Virginia. Appalachian Mysteria. There's my plug. Thanks for letting me plug that.
Absolutely not a problem at all. Send me the link actually, because I do have a undercover obsession with those true crime shows.
Yeah.
I'm all about any of that true crime stuff.
It's done by Kendall and Sarah at Chromatic Media in Morgantown, and they've been working with me here in LA and putting the podcast out. And it's just fun to make a really awesome podcast. It's done like millions of downloads, and it's a West Virginia product that. As somebody from West Virginia and in the podcasting business forever, like that's just like it for me, like mission accomplished.
Yeah, exactly. And it's nice to have that West Virginia flavor. I always do enjoy when I get a random LinkedIn request or something and you see the West Virginia alum, even if I didn't go to school with that person or know that person. It's a fellow Mountaineer doing it big. So I'm going to support and I'm all about the true crime stuff. So absolutely. I'll check that out. Everyone else should check that out. But again, Matty, I definitely appreciate you joining me on the show. We'll definitely have you back, and we'll be talking in some way or fashion here. And let me know if you want me to hop on there with you and Steve to talk some maybe Mountaineer basketball.
I will.
It might be a basketball school right now.
I promise you, when we get back on, you'll be our first guest.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I will be tweeting at you and tweeting. I love WVU Twitter. It's my favorite thing in the world. So,
it's a roller coaster ride in and of itself, right there. Yeah, we'll definitely see each other on Twitter if nowhere else. So, Matty Staudt, again, thanks for joining me on the show, man. Have a great rest of your evening. I'm a little jealous that you get to sit out there in sunshine, and I have the fall weather. It's getting a little chilly here on the East Coast. But again, Matty Staudt. Joining me from Los Angeles as he is the president of Jam Street Media, EVP of podcast, the Amaze Media Lab, former host, or maybe host again of the Burning Couch podcast, which I know that's a distinguished podcast that's been around a while. That was one that was known early in the podcast days, back from still when I was in school at WVU. We have that connection there. We have the podcast connection here. I've made most of my professional career in digital media. He's done it big and has success in the digital podcast space for sure. So happy to be able to chop it up with him here on the show, even though for him here as a West Virginia fan, it is after a pretty bad loss for the Mountaineers. But again, thanks to Matty Staudt for joining me on the show. And he's trusting a climb. His analogy was fantastic, though. He's trusting the climb off of it from being an escalator to an elevator to now it's an escalator without the button pressed, without the escalation. You got to walk up that thing. So yeah, I hear him there because again, Neil Brown needed the big win over Virginia Tech. He needed to be able to say he had a big win on his resume, and he does now. But it gets a little tainted when you're throwing bad losses still there. Remember, folks, again, I love Neil Brown. Great to the media, great to the alums, great to the former players. He's great. Okay. And I think he wants to stay there. He truly believes in this. He apologizes to the fans and players all the time. So at least he realizes when there's an error of the ways. Takes ownership. Dana Holgorsen wasn't always doing that, blaming everybody else. And it was prickly. Dana Holgorsen wasn't doing Zooms with anybody. Imagine Dana Holgorsen doing Zooms, appearing on shows, podcasts. It wasn't going to happen. However, the issue with Dana Holgorsen and the reason why some wanted him fired prior to him leaving to go to Houston, and really happy that maybe he went to Houston when he did, is because it was a continuation of a big win early, the Orange Bowl over Clemson, of course, before they became the dynasty they now are. Even some big wins after, of course, Will Grier at the end of the game, big win over Texas. But I was discussing this with some alums recently. What did that do? What did that mean? Obviously, the Orange Bowl meant something, but then it was big wins and bad losses, or a roller coaster ride of a season like you're seeing now. It was similar production from what you're not expecting and not happy with for Neil Brown. So if it's not acceptable about what's going on in the field with Neil Brown, then how much longer do you trust this? Because again, obviously Neil Brown's not going to be fired. Shane Lyons believes in Neil Brown. He's trusting the climb. They're in lockstep with each other. They knew this was going to take a while. I think the issue is maybe last year they got a year ahead of schedule, but you still see it as a logical person. A bowl victory, 7 wins. It shouldn't be lesser the next year in a more wide open conference. Especially despite conference realignment, there was controversy the year earlier before the season with the racism scandal and the defensive coordinator getting ousted. So again, they managed to propel that into a bowl victory this year. You're looking at some of these decisions. You're looking at some of these games. You're looking at preparation for some of these games. We're hearing all the right stuff in these press conferences and any of these interviews throughout the week. You go into the game. Here's a bad loss after a big win and a game you felt pretty good about after the Oklahoma game when we losing by 3. That's 2 weeks in a row. Mountaineer fans probably feeling good wrapping up their weekend. Not the case here this weekend. Not the case after this game. Neil Brown again going nowhere. He'll be the coach next year and probably onward. They knew this was going to be a process. They're trusting a process or trusting a climb. It's a freaking hashtag, but it's also real life for the program and the athletic program. But are you really trusting it as a fan, and how much longer can it go on? If we're 4 or 5 years in and it's still 7 wins as a ceiling and it's still maybe a big win, but bad losses and a roller coaster ride, what does it matter? Will the fans revolt against Brown like they did on Holgorsen? They all loved Holgorsen after the Orange Bowl game, eventually turned on him. This isn't just about personality of the production is not there. Again, appreciate Matty Staudt joining me on the show. I will definitely be happy to join him on the Burning Couch podcast if he brings that one back. Because again, that's distinguished all around the West Virginia media circuit, digital platform circuit for sure. Head over to WVU Sports now for a post-game coverage of this game. The Mountaineers lose it 23-20 to Texas Tech. West Virginia now falling to 2-3 on the year. And of course, that's not good. That's not good right now for the climb. That's not good now for this season. And it's not going to get easier coming up with Baylor, a ranked team who is riding high, waiting in the wings. West Virginia traveling to Baylor. That's a far trip. That's a road game. Not getting easier in any respects for the Mountaineers, who now have some pressure on them to turn this around, to not go backwards. A climb means up. It does not mean you go down, you go up, and then back down again, and then you're climbing again, and you're falling off the mountain at some point. So we're not there yet. We'll see when the program is there. But this got to sting for Mountaineer fans. This got to be that bad loss the Mountaineer fans knew was eventually going to happen after the last couple of weeks. This is a bad one. It's not a good loss. This is a bad one. Can this even be saved? What will that look like for the program? What would save the season for you? And regardless of any of that, is this time now to tear it up? I say yes. It is now time to make this the Garrett Greene show. Make Garrett Greene the starter. That will mean more losses. That will mean growing pains. That will mean wincing at moments when you see a Greene pass, but you're already doing it with Daggy. Daggy only takes you so far. There's a ceiling with Jarret Daggy, and it's probably 6 wins. It's probably 7 wins. It's like last year. Are you even going to get there, though? That's going to be an upward climb to even get there the way you are right now in this season with this schedule coming up and knowing more losses are definitely going to be there. So I would give it to Garrett Greene. He's going to be the quarterback next year, sink or swim. It's not going to be Daggy no matter what. You got to get Garrett Greene ready. You got to figure out if he can pass enough to become your starting quarterback. We've seen the run plays. That's not enough. We got to see if he can read a defense. He can do it through a whole game. He can throw passes with precision as a passer, as his number one thing, as a QB. That would fit more into Neil Brown's system. And then you sprinkle some runs in as well. Maybe you still see some of Daggy, but I want to see a lot more from Garrett Greene moving forward this season even, because now the West Virginia climb, it's about climbing towards 2022, no longer worrying about 2021 after a bad loss for the Mountaineers.